I'm excited about chatting with you guys, and hopefully it's gone live to our other channels. It's so hard to sometimes see that when, we're on here. And so anyway, we're going. So Happy New Year, my friends. It's so great to see
Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year. So good to see you.
Well, I'm glad to see other faces as opposed to just sort of staring at a screen all day. So I'm excited to have you guys talk about customer experience, because I think a lot of us, well, I know I did only online shopping this year, so I'm sure that's a big part of everybody's experience is customer experience online, which is interesting that you guys have gone in that direction this year. So I'm just going to introduce you guys. So I'm here with Danielle, Kovac, and Margaret Tsuji from Leap to Digital, and your company provides strategic consulting and execution to help brands go from digital, from I guess not just traditional, but any kind of customer service, really to focus on the digital customer experience. So my great friend Danielle, that I haven't seen in, we went to high school together. So go Lancers.
Don't say how many years. Don't say how many years, because then everyone will be like, oh, that's how old she is, huh?
I know, it's terrifying. Since our kids are in high school, it's like, no, we're not that far out of high school. But, and there's Amy, she'll say go Lancers too. So Amy's a former, what do we call them? I guess alumni from ACI, I suppose. And Amy's always my greatest cheerleader. She shows up to all of these things. So go Lancers. Go Lancers.
I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
It's hilarious. So Danielle's an award-winning customer service executive with over 20 years of experience in the customer service industry. So it sort of just puts our age into that sort of category when we've had 20 years of experience, more than 20 years of experience. As a customer experience strategist, Danielle creates a vision that inspires others to work collaboratively and ultimately deliver exceptional business results. She has a reputation for being a hands-on leader who continually challenges the status quo and evolves underperforming functions into high-performing customer-centric teams. And you guys work together in a former life. And so Margaret Tsuji is also an award-winning customer service leader. And her experience is in strategic planning, marketing, facilitation, and customer service at some of Canada's largest companies in the telecommunications, technology, and retail sectors. She's known for building high-performing teams and setting new standards for organizational excellence through world-class customer service. And in addition to this, Margaret is a leadership coach, as an associate certified coach with the International Coaching Federation, and is also a certified professional facilitator with the International Association of Facilitators. Whew, you guys have got so many accomplishments. We're excited about all this. And I'm sure everybody else who's tuning into, and I never really know who's tuning in, but anybody else who's tuning in, we're all working from home. The kids are home. So if Wi-Fi goes out and I disappear, or for whatever reason, Margaret or Danielle disappear, you know what's happened. It's usually technology. Go technology. Anyway, so we're talking today about how businesses can make more money by improving the customer's digital experience. And I'm sure as soon as you tell people that's exactly what you guys do, someone's got a story. Oh, when I bought, blah, 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 when I went online, why does this, and that's exactly when we had sort of a catch up. Is exactly where I went to. Why is this happening? Why is there not a customer experience? So tell me a little bit about that. So how did you guys decide to start Leap to Digital?
Well, I think there's many amazing things that have come out of the pandemic. And I know we were just catching up talking about, it does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, but there's been some really amazing things that have come out of the pandemic. And one of those is this gigantic shift to digital. For many organizations, they really needed to embrace digital. And it has, we talk often about how it's accelerated strategy that you would plan for years over days and weeks. And that was out of necessity. There was lockdowns and closures and so on. And so businesses and people, we needed to pivot. We needed to pivot to online. And so
fast. Like there was
fast and super fast for sure. Yeah. And so Margaret and I, having had an amazing opportunity to build an exceptional digital customer service experience at Rogers, when we left during the pandemic, we said, hey, now is the time that we should really help other organizations. We have a lot of experience in this space. A lot of organizations have turned on these new experiences, or maybe they've refined an experience that they had. but it's sort of like, well, what's next? And where do I take this to the next step? And I quickly turned this on, and it's not working how I would like it to work. And so for us, we thought timing is right. There are so many out there that we really feel compelled to help. And amazing customer experience is not just for the big players. It's not just for organizations that have, huge dollars to invest. It's for every organization in every sector. And so we thought, let's do this. And we love working together. So we're like, oh, amazing. Let's keep working together. So that's really how we started.
That's amazing. And yeah, were you going to jump in, Margaret? No?
Oh, just to say that, I think if a business has an online presence, which really all businesses do, then you need to have some sort of online customer service experience as well.
Yeah, and the strategy that goes around it, because it's not just, I think most businesses just figure that, well, the customer service will come. It'll, by osmosis. Once the customers start coming in, then they'll figure out how to navigate around that. And I just know as a marketer, strategy is so crucial as far as building things out, because if you don't have a plan, right? Right. So
I think some organizations were also thinking that these new behaviors we're seeing from customers, online presence, would go away, that it was a blip because of the pandemic. But what we're seeing is this big shift. So many organizations now are continuing to let their employees work from home. They're not returning back to an office. We were chatting earlier about our kids are back online to virtual learning. And so the more you're in a place where you're online, it just continues to encourage customers to make online a part of their everyday being, whether it's, ordering groceries, whether it's online shopping for curbside pickup. Whatever the case happens to be, it's really become a part of who we are. And I joke, my 81-year-old stepmom, who swore she'd never touched technology, is now on Facebook. And I thought, never in a million years. But it was, being alone and isolated, as many of us have been during the pandemic, you're really depending so heavily on online to really bring us together too.
Yeah, and that the one thing that I know, and we've all been in sort of the digital experience for, I think of social media being around for 10 years, social media more than 20 years, not, social media for 10, like online for about 20, really. In that, like in my lifetime, that's gone by like this. But we have children now that are digital natives. They're so used to using it, and yet we still also have our boomers, our seniors that are not digital natives. It's not as intuitive for them, and the customer experience certainly does get more frustrating the further away that you understand technology, but yet the customer wants what the customer wants when they want it. So making sure that businesses are aware of these different demographics, that some are technology savvy, some not so much, right? So Stephen's comment here, a quality experience for customers can help reduce business costs. Absolutely. And that's beneficial for all businesses and not just the corporation. Absolutely, Steve. I totally agree. And that's what these lovely ladies are here to talk about, for sure. Yeah. I cut you off, Danielle. I don't know if you had a follow-up thought about sort of like the different, demographics that are using technology now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we're seeing some really interesting things come out of the pandemic. And, you mentioned baby boomers, and they're the fastest growing target audience right now for Facebook. And so I think the pandemic has also maybe forced, is the word I'll use, to get different generations out of their comfort zone to use and embrace technology in a different way. But now we're seeing that happen more often. And, from a customer experience perspective, I think what we always like to give advice on when we're talking with clients about what channel makes sense for them, it's about understanding who your customer is, understanding their preferences for support, linking it to generation is one of those ideas. And so talking with a university, for example, being your audience, your customers, your students, they are digital natives. They are born and raised with the phone in their hand. And so, support is still calling an IVR to change course selection. That may be something that they're not interested in, whereas using their phone to send a quick text message, as an example, would be something that they would prefer to be supported in. So it's a really important consideration for organizations, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's where, I think for me, what I see is that's where the breakdown happens with businesses. And I think even some of those legacy brands, and I know you guys were formerly with Rogers, those legacy brands may have a harder time sort of catching up with the fact that they, they had a sort of a traditional approach before. And now how do you assimilate digital, and it's not just Facebook, right? Like it's across, like you said, like it's text messaging, it's email messaging, I'm overwhelmed. I've been doing this for years and I'm totally overwhelmed with the number of different channels that we have to be thinking about. So how do you simplify that? So seeing that we live in a digital first environment where, I mean, there's some statistics that say that we would rather lose smell and taste, which some people are doing during the pandemic. We'd rather lose smell or taste than to leave our cell phones behind. I mean, there's something about that. So what do you think are some of the best practices for an organization now that we're in a digital first experience?
I think Danielle touched on it earlier, but really it's being where your customers are, meeting them where they're at, how they want to be serviced. We have customers now where text messaging is the norm. My parents message all the time. Danielle's stepmother's on Facebook. Like messaging, short messaging is really just the way of life now, and how you keep in touch and how you connect with others. And so the expectation is that the brands that you're dealing with are also doing the same thing. And that's sort of the gap that we're seeing, whereas we're seeing brands offer traditional service or traditional channels like, let's call it telephone, even email as an example. And I think what's happening is we're seeing, and sort of to Stephen's comment as well, customer service is sometimes a bit of an afterthought. And Leslie, you talked about this in the beginning, like you're marketing your product, you're developing your brand, you're launching, you're selling, and then it's, oh, wait a second, now we have a customer that needs support or we need service after the fact. And so what's happened is with COVID, we've leapfrogged into this digital world where everything's done digitally. I think that we saw some stats that, e-commerce fast forwarded by 10 years in a matter of months. 2021, we saw over 300% increase in e-commerce just in Canada alone. And so we still have some, let's call it bricks and mortar retailers who offer a digital experience, but then their customer service experience is actually an offline experience. So there's a bit of a disconnect when you're, buying everything online. You can buy through Instagram nowadays, and yet I can't get service in that same channel.
Which is so frustrating from the user experience. I mean, we're all customers. I mean, at the end of the day, we are all customers. And I think, kind of like that undercover boss, more often than not, brands and businesses don't get on the same side of the table as the customer to experience it through their lens. So that's what you guys do, is to provide that sort of objective point of view to say, okay, so here's where the disconnect is happening. Because as I say this a million times, and I'll say it again, when you're inside the jar, you can't see the label, right? When you're the brand and you're doing the work, you think, well, my brand's the best. We provide the best customer service to you, right? It's really waking up to how are you doing this more efficiently to make sure that it's streamlined, that you don't have these hiccups. And I'm gonna let you guys talk because this is all about you guys. But I just know from it, because I am a customer, is realizing, the frustration that I have with brands when, as a marketer, I want to provide feedback to them, but I know that unless it's public, unless it's using social channels, you're not going to get the same customer service as you might going and complaining online, which, I think is kind of frustrating. I don't know. So having said that, what are the biggest mistakes that you guys see with organizations when they're engaging with their customers online?
Well, as I said earlier, the pandemic really created a sense of urgency around quickly pivoting to digital. For some organizations, it may be, now we have a website. We didn't have a website. Some developed an app that they quickly turned on for their customers. Some had a website, but now they had buy flows. So you could actually complete transactions online and arrange for delivery or curbside pickup and so on. And so before I sort of highlight some of the opportunities we've seen, I want to shout out that I think many organizations have done a remarkable job with not a lot of resources and not a lot of time. So I'm a pretty patient customer, and I've been pretty patient during the pandemic because I recognized many organizations they basically moved to mountains in days and weeks. So I think we need to recognize some really great things happen. Maybe not the optimal experience, maybe not the experience that brands want their customers to experience, but out of necessity and making sure that life continued and you could still purchase things that are very important to you and so on, or have access to healthcare. I think some really amazing things happen. In terms of some opportunities, I think that are quite prevalent with what we've seen, particularly around online. There's still a desire, I think, for some brands to although the customer starts their journey online, maybe it's self-service, maybe there's a capability the customer can do themselves, they're quickly to move them off to an offline channel. And so, a recent example I'll share is an experience that I had with Bell, where I started live chat conversation. I'm all about digital customer service support and online. And I asked for something specific to happen, and then I needed to speak with them by phone. And so that's just an example where there's an extra step for me as a customer. So I reached out to you in a channel that I prefer, a channel that you offer for your customers, but unfortunately you moved me to a telephone call, which is not something I was necessarily looking at. And so this shift from an online experience to offline we see quite often. It's not something that customers anticipate or support, given it's often more work on the part of the customer. There's some nervousness around online customer service support. You mentioned it, Leslie, with customers using it, social in particular. Twitter is a good example of a channel that sometimes customers turn to. I'll use the word rant, like they want their voice to be heard and heard very loudly. And so many organizations that kind of shy away from online support. They kind of worry about what might happen if it's in writing, and could something do a left turn from a customer service perspective. And so with that, many brands often set up different rules of engagement for customers based on the channel that they reach out to. So if you called, you might get different service versus if you reached out through, let's say, social media. Where we see this often is sales and retention efforts. So canceling your service, downgrading services, adding services, new customer, and so on. Sometimes there's unique offerings available through traditional support channels or face-to-face, like retail and so on, knowing that it's a conversation that's happened that's not captured in writing. So some brands fear the customer has something in writing. Are they going to go and publish my conversation? All of a sudden on red flag forums, here's the step-by-step live chat conversation I had, and so on. But from a customer's perspective, we don't want to do the work. We don't want to have to try different channels to get support or necessarily be provided with what's the right offering for us based on the fact that I just chose digital versus picking up the phone. And the last thing I'll just say is more of an opportunity around this a belief that digital support is the same as traditional phone support. And what I mean by that is it's really important that those nuances are recognized and that you are hiring the right team members to support your digital conversations, and you're investing in your frontline teams to have good conversations with customers, teaching them, you can hear my tone of voice now. We're having a conversation, but behind a keyboard, you're not hearing that. And so how do you train your frontline staff so that they can bring empathy into conversation, and just how vital it is that they choose the right language when they're engaging with their customers. So a traditional phone service agent doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be an exceptional digital customer service agent, right? So it's about understanding the nuances and hiring for the profile. So I would think that those are probably a few of the sort of common opportunity areas right now that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so important. And I think that's often overlooked too, that even though we're connecting human to human, that these digital devices, that we sort of lose that disconnect of the social niceties that we would do face to face, like the common courtesies that we would have over the phone or face to face, or sort of lost a little bit when you kind of get online in a way. There's an interesting book that I just purchased it, the audiobook, but I probably need to, I haven't listened to it yet. It's all about digital body language, about the nuances of how things are getting reframed in that context, because it is a whole new world that there are miscommunications that are happening from that perspective. So I agree. And also, so this isn't sort of I usually try to give you guys questions ahead of time, and I don't know if I can put you on the spot here, but I've heard that from like an economical standpoint, that digital customer service is actually more cost efficient, because these customer service agents can actually do more than having someone on the phone for 20 minutes or whatever, that they can handle it faster and more. Is that true, or am I just hearing nonsense?
No, it's not nonsense. You can, because of what's called concurrency and the ability to have more than one conversation live at a time, in live chat, in social, in any kind of a messaging platform, especially if it's an asynchronous type of conversation where the customer comes and goes as they please. You know, they're hopping on a subway, they're getting to a cab, they're dealing with their children at the time, they send you a message, you send something back. There may be a bit of a gap there. And so you can have multiple of these conversations going at a time, and they kind of slot into one another more efficiently than, like, let's say, just a one-on-one conversation like we're having right now.
Right. So you can, like you said, like you have multiple different people at the same time. So you're actually dealing with, you're hopefully troubleshooting on, in as opposed to just sort of one-to-one. So that's just another reason why people have to really be thinking about that customer experience. Again, another question I haven't, you guys can answer this. And I think I know the answer to this, but let me just back up. When I started teaching digital marketing, social media marketing, 10 years ago, oftentimes even the smallest brands would say, I'm afraid of going online for fear someone's going to say something bad about my business. And I was always like, well, wouldn't you rather deal with it? Like, wouldn't you rather people tell you to your face than someone telling you behind your back? And then it's how you respond. You guys sort of talked a little bit about the fear of, well, what if someone does see something bad about my brand online?
Well, let's debunk that quickly, because they're talking about you already.
Yeah.
Whether you're there or not, the conversations are happening. So it can be behind your back, if you want to call it that way, or you can be a part of that conversation.
100%. Yeah. And so the question I'm often asked, I've done a little research on this, but you guys are the experts. So if someone does say something bad about your brand online, how would you guys recommend handling, dealing with that?
First of all, thank goodness. So thankfully, they've let us know that they're not happy about something. So that's their way of saying, although not using these words, that's their way of saying, I actually want you to help me. I'm looking to get this question answered, this problem resolved, whatever the case happens to be. And so what's most important is organizations recognizing it's going to happen. And so how do you plan for it? What are the right processes that you need to have, that you've developed, so that when your frontline team is faced with a comment, a post from a customer, they're equipped, they know exactly what they need to do to handle it. And so there are often common scenarios that happen. And so there's, linkages to what's the right language to use, how do we want to respond as a brand, what's the, from a brand perspective, what sort of kind of words that we use with our customers that are important that we want to convey. So it's making sure they have access to that. And when that big left turn happens, because it will, where they post something that you don't anticipate, it's a surprise bomb. They know how to get help quickly. You don't want your frontline team trying to create and craft their own response. You want to make sure that you have really good, strong ties with the team that would support that. Many organizations have a public affairs team or corporate communications team. Some leverage their marketing and brand support as well. So it's about making sure the relationships are in place and defined so that you can get quick access to the response to provide back to that customer. And it might still be your customer service agent that is responding, but they're responding with the right language that is supported from the right people. And so that would be a couple of the suggestions that we would have, but don't shy away from it. Get ahead of it. If there's one thing we'll tell you, it's going to happen. And so the more that you can plan, the less anxiety and concern your team members will feel when it does happen.
Yeah, 100%. And I, because there's two things that I sort of with that is have a crisis management in plan, right? Like, so have that crisis management in place. Also, it's to your point, right? Prepare your team with the right kind of language because the more prepared you are, as you said, the less anxiety there's going to be. And it's how a brand responds that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
So I think not answering can get things to go viral. When a brand isn't engaging, that's when I see the like things happen and they just go wild, is because the brand hasn't sort of nipped it in the bud. They just sort of let it fester. So I think
if you leave it too long, then it only allows other customers to contribute to the conversation. So you really want to get ahead of it as quickly as you can. And sort of on the opposite of that, we always suggest that you're not focused on the negative or crisis posts or where customers are reaching out for help. When they share accolades, praise for your brand, equally, you need to be responding to those as well. That's, I would say, one thing that Margaret and I do tend to see is based on resources. Often it's get to the cases where the customer needs help. And then you have all these remarkable, beautiful posts praising brands that just go, they're not acknowledged. And so I think that's a huge missed opportunity for brands.
Oh, absolutely. When you keep hearing all these things about influencers, these are your best brand ambassadors. You've got happy people, or even people that were annoyed that then when you transform the experience for them, become your best brand ambassadors too. So why not? And people just want to be heard, right? If they're going to take the time to stop and talk about your brand and say, I love you, or I don't love you, it's like,
respond to both.
Absolutely. And why, like, would if someone walked up to your customer service agent or your representative in the organization and said, I love or dislike your brand, they just pick up and walk away? No, they would have a dialogue with them, right? I mean, it just seems so counterintuitive that so many brands, and I see it starting to get there. I can't believe it's been 10 years for people finally to wake up. Steve's got that same sort of like, what sorcery is this? If you have a plan.
I was just reading his note. It's hysterical.
He's a funny guy, Steve. So it's like, have a plan. They're in, Amy runs a conference for project managers and business analysts. So that's Steven's forte, is business analysts and project managers who, they're troubleshooting too, right? They're looking for ways to sort of optimize the business experience for sure. So how can brands take an omni-channel approach? Because as I said, we've got, so just even your website, your email, your text messaging, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Like, how does a business then go, okay, so let's synthesize this all together so that we take this omni-channel approach?
There's so many, it's so complicated. Really, if you think about it, there's so many ways you can support customers. There's self-serve, there's assisted support, whether it's traditional phone, email, text, social, you name it, and fast moving what's coming next. And so, some advice that we always give is linking back to our earlier conversation is don't try to be everywhere. Understand where you feel your customers are in channels that they're already using, and where there's going to be comfort for them. And don't deploy support everywhere. Focus in on the channels that make the most sense for your customer base. So we always start there. And then also ensuring that your channels are connected. So if the customer starts their journey online, let's say I do a Google search, it brings me to your website. I'm on your website. I'm looking for some information. I realize I want to do something, whether I can do it online or now I need to connect with someone. connect those experiences so it's so easy for the customer. It's not many steps that they need to take. So if I'm online browsing, you have your pop-up live chat. Hey, can I help you with something? Or if the customer picks up the phone and calls and they've done something online, your team members can see that. So the customer is not having to re-explain, oh, I went through your buy flow online and I put it in my shopping cart and then something went wrong and I don't know what to do. It's really important that you make it easy for your customers, seamless for your customers, but also that you have tools that work for your frontline team so that they can really help support the customer in that experience. So choose wisely those right channels, make sure that they're connected. And the third thing that I would say is promote them. Make sure your customers know that you are there and how you are there to support them. We see many organizations that have turned on a social media support, but they haven't told their customers. They haven't let their customers know, hey, we're here 24/7, reach out. So get really creative to ensure that your customers know that there are different ways that they can be serviced, and encourage them to reach out in the way that works best for them.
That's great. That's really great advice, because I think that that's often like overlooked or missed too, right? Is again, they think this is the way that we've created the strategy and this is how we're going to reach out to our customers, but that's not the way the customers are expecting to be reached. So yeah, like I believe it or not, even 20 years into the internet, we still have to put click here on a lot of different, from a marketing perspective, if you don't have that call to action, people are like, I don't know where to go. And it's not all that intuitive. It's really interesting how the user experience online, it's not necessarily taken into consideration from every business, or they have to reverse engineer everything and they're not quite there yet, where we passively consume information on these little babies. But once we're actively purchasing things, oftentimes we move to a laptop experience, which is a different experience. And is that seamless, right? Those pop-ups, which or paywalls or whatever, they start to pop up and you're like, you've lost me. You had me and then you lost me. And it's so that kind of goes into the next thing about how do organizations then how can they make more money by digitizing the customer experience? I think we've talked about some of them already, but if there's anything I'm missing, just jump in.
I mean, in addition to all the cost savings that can be gained when you have digital conversations, I think there's two more things we wanted to add to that. I think one is every time you have a conversation with a customer, whether it's traditional, digital, bricks and mortars, in person, that's an opportunity to strengthen that relationship. It's also an opportunity for you to lose that customer, right? Because there are all the stats out there saying that, and especially now with customers getting a little more impatient when it comes to service experiences. But the more amazing service experiences you can deliver, the more your customers willing to stay with you, and the more your customers willing to tell their friends to come and buy from you.
Absolutely. That's what branding is, right? It's a promise of, this is my brand and this is what I'm going to deliver.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And then in addition to the piece that we touched on earlier about the cost savings when it comes to the digital conversations and the concurrency piece, there's also the opportunity when you have a digital conversation to insert a virtual assistant. And so that virtual assistant, that bot, can have that conversation, can have those sort of, let's call them the low-hanging fruit, the simpler conversations, really speedy answers that the human being in your frontline team doesn't have to have that conversation. They can have the more complex conversation, the one that requires empathy, compassion, real troubleshooting, that then strengthens the relationship with your customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna have to take a beat to like read, or maybe you guys can read while I continue to talk if you want to address the comment from Angela. Is it Angela? My font is like this small on my screen right now. So go ahead and one of you can read that while I sort of natter on. It is so important to recognize all of these things, and to your point, like that, it's so much harder to please people so that they do share with their friends, right? Like there's that sort of rule of thumb that if they're pissed off, they're going to tell 10 people. If they really like, they might tell a couple. And so you do want to surprise and delight them, because I think from my experience as a customer, it's often the, which is going to give me the least amount of hassle. Where can I go that I'm going to get the least, not which is going to give me the best experience. And those really do surprise and delight when you have a brand. I'm just going to throw one out there, and I haven't used it in a while, but I used to buy an OtterBox for my phone. And I remember years ago, because you have a little kid, and they're dropping your phone all the time. And that OtterBox, not only was it an expensive purchase, but it was a quality, like it was a very expensive purchase. But when it did break, I got another one, without having to pay for it. And those kinds of customer experiences that actually surprise and delight, because all you're expecting is, oh, now I've got to go out and buy another one. And when a company stands behind their branding and they stand behind their brand promise, that's it's a shock sometimes, which is sad. So I don't know if any of you have had the chance to read the comment there, but if you want to address it at all.
So I think, so Angela's just adding some thought to the conversation, which is around how often potential customers start their journey online, and it's more for research. It's more like, is this business really legitimate, or is what they're offering legitimate, what they say, what they stand for? Should I be making an investment? Not necessarily making the purchase on that online, but doing a lot of the research. We definitely see that often, and particularly in places like forums, community forums. There's been a resurgence of community forums lately, where it's a place that you go to hear from other customers. And let's face it, reviews is an example of that as well, but you're really going to get the true insights in what's happening, and not from a corporate speak perspective, but really from the end user, from other customers. And so we do see often customers having their journey across many different places. Starting online is not a surprise anymore. I don't know about you, but I Google everything. I often start my search myself, doing a Google search to get some information before I decide where I want to go next, which might be the website of the organization. It may be live chat, it may be making a call, but it is definitely a common place where a customer's journey is beginning. And the difficulty with that is if you're just searching and checking things out, but not actually doing anything, it is difficult to recognize that the customer was there. So I think Angela was leading into the customers not really leaving sort of a trace that they were there. It's kind of hard to piece together their journey if they were just researching and reviewing and you don't really know what happened. We are seeing more sophisticated organizations that have done more investment here that are investing in that space to tie a story together a little bit more. The slippery slope, or the piece you always want to think about, is coming across as Big Brother, coming across as, how did that organization know that I happened to be on this web page for 35 seconds looking here? So we always say it's important to be mindful of how you can use that intelligence that you can gain access to if you invest in that space in the right ways for your customer, so that you can really personalize the experience in a way that is not making the customer really question the access that you have to. And you probably see it all the time. You are looking up something online, and then you're in Facebook, and then you have an ad right away about what you were just looking at. So it's definitely taken us in an interesting place for sure.
Yeah,
thank you, Angelo.
As a marketer, I love it, right? As a marketer, I love that we're capturing all this data so that we give the customer what they want when they want it at the right time. And my students at the college will say, I kind of like it. And so that's, again, a different demographic that kind of likes to have the brand stalk them, for lack of a better word, because I think it's creepy. We're of the same sort of generation where we lived in a life in a pre-Google world. And so for me, it's creepy. I don't like that brands are like really getting that much intel. In fact, even as a digital marketer, I've deleted Facebook from my phone. I'm this close to deleting Instagram from my phone, and only doing it from an online where I can control how much. I can control it, but it really terrifies me how much is captured when you're not actually even on Facebook, when you're not on Instagram and so forth. So it's creepy. But that's, again, maybe a generational thing. Right?
I think sometimes if the insights are used in the right way, so for example, customers are looking at this page a long time, asking ourselves why as a company, well, what are they looking at? Is there maybe a live chat proactive option we should put on that page so that we can, proactively make ourselves available to help them? So I think using the insights, if the intent is to truly improve the customer experience and the user experience that you touched on earlier, Leslie, then I think then it's being used wisely. If it's being used in the way of making a sale, then I think it's about just understanding how that's approached with the customer. That's where you cross the line of making it easier for me to, you've reached the creepy side, right? So that's the, something that those insights are very important. It's how you use them. Mm-hmm.
And this is where when I'm doing the teaching about digital strategy, and I borrowed this from a guy he calls himself a digital anthropologist by the name of Brian Solis, who says that social media or online marketing is much more about much more about sociology and psychology than it is about technology. And that's when I went, oh, that's why I get this stuff. Like, it is much more about behavioral analytics, and we're getting more and more into that. And of course, as a marketer, what do marketers do? We ruin everything, right? We kind of get, trying to get into the psychology of why are people buying? What's the intent behind it? And so it's is it manipulation? Is it persuasion? I don't know.
I think that's a whole other topic for us for another podcast.
That's another session.
It totally is. I think it's exciting, as I said, from a marketing and customer service standpoint. I think it's really fascinating because of getting into this sort of behind the scenes and doing it in such a nuanced way, which we would do because of the face-to-face interactions. We would understand the nuanced way of sort of emotional intelligence, if you will, and how to take that emotional intelligence and then turn it into a digital experience, which again, that's why you guys are masters at this. So speaking of sort of metrics and tracking and things like that, how do your customers really measure success? Are there specific metrics that they should be focusing upon?
I think that's a great question. A couple of things in terms of best practices. The first thing would be making sure that you have metrics that are consistent across all your channels. So that from a digital customer service perspective, whether it's social media, live chat, text messaging, ensuring that you have similar metrics that you can compare so that you know where customers might be receiving, for example, from a customer satisfaction perspective or net promoter score, customer effort score. These are some of the metrics that we see that are consistent across all channels so that you know where customers might feel or might perceive that they're getting different support, better support, where there might be more opportunity. From a digital perspective, there are some unique measures. Margaret talked about one, which is concurrency. So that is just allowing you to know how many customers you're supporting at one time. I'm also recognizing that the service experience is designed differently. And so where social media or text messaging is more of an asynchronous conversation. So you have the customer respond to you when it's convenient for you, and then when they've stepped away and it's not convenient. So your conversations could be minutes, days, hours, weeks, based on when the customer responds. They're very much in the driver's seat. So comparing response time or speed of response might be a little bit different when you look at some channels that are more asynchronous in nature. And then also a lot of organizations from a social media perspective look at things like sentiment. They try to get a sense of customers that appreciate their brand, whether it's a positive sentiment, a negative sentiment. And so those are some measures that are a little bit more unique. But those are a couple of the key metrics I say are most common with organizations that we're working with.
Yeah, and I think to your kind of going back to one of your other points too is this. I just recently had this experience buying something in the United States. I had it shipped up here. I was then expected to pay like another additional sort of duty tax on the purchase. I wasn't sort of given that heads up ahead of time. So I just went back to the brand and I said, hey, listen, just so you know, your Canadian customers might be getting billed this. You might want to build this into your, like the checkout process of just letting customers sort of do this. They not only gave me back my money, but then they took, so they said, send a screen grab of your bill of lading. We'll give you back the money. And we'll also, if you wouldn't mind, would you give us a Google review based on this? Like, I love this. I love it. And gets it that if the customer is happy, that's the moment you say, would you leave us a public review? Right?
But Leslie, what they did wasn't just because you were happy with the purchase. You were happy with how they fixed the problem that you brought to their attention.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, and I've seen this, even my own dentist office, they're doing their best to get more Google reviews, how, those kinds of things when it's a public facing, whatever the organization is. And you wouldn't necessarily think of a dentist office as being sort of B2C or B2B, right? It's more, but it's but people are Googling. I know how many experiences we've all done when we've Googled and the reviews are, either not so great or, and that's another question for you guys as well is, should somebody have a 5-star review all the time? Is that a good thing?
I mean, I think striving for higher star reviews are better for sure. And there are, when Danielle and I were at Rogers, we had the team actually expand their scope of support to include responding to reviews for the app. And we saw an increase in the user ratings on those apps, because at the end of the day, if the customer they're giving you some sort of feedback. And so if you can respond and actually address some of that feedback and fix something and make something better for them, you'll ultimately get a better review. If you have, 1,000 5-star reviews, I might be a little suspicious.
Right.
I might want to go through all that and see what that's all about personally.
Yeah, it seems a little too good to be true, because there's always going to be haters going to hate, right? There's always going to be somebody out there that is going to be like, I hated it, because you can't please anybody. So sometimes a negative review here and there isn't always a bad thing. Is that what I'm sort of taking from?
That's what I would say. I think it's an opportunity for you to respond as a brand. A customer's giving you feedback. You have an opportunity to address, respond, maybe provide a solution.
Right.
I also think that mistakes happen. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the time, particularly with customer service, there's a person there. There's a human being behind the service experience. And so sometimes mistakes are going to happen. And so having all 5-star reviews might encourage a customer to form an expectation of what their experience should be every single time. And so I think seeing sometimes that it might be a lower review, but seeing how the brand recovered, I think is very important. Again, because we are human, supporting customers is often people behind that. And so stuff's going to happen. Mistakes are going to happen. A shipment's going to go missing. Particularly right now, there's a lot of supply chain issues. There are things that are going to happen right now. And so it's recognizing what do you do with that and how do you recover as a brand to really help that customer. One thing on reviews that's really quite interesting that we're starting to see, Leslie, are brands are including it on their website. They're actually putting it even on their landing page, showing as a measure of their success what their Google reviews are looking like. So that's definitely something that's a little newer that we're seeing now.
Yeah, that's really cool, because again, those reviews, if someone's going to stake their own reputation on saying I had a great experience with this brand, it's hard to get people to do that publicly, right? It's not easy to get people to sort of say I love this brand, for fear of, is this brand going to let me down when I've referred strangers, my friends and family, to this experience? Are they going to get the same thing, right? So getting people to actually step up and do this from a public standpoint is not easy, and so you have to really go over the top. And what's, as we know, Seth Godin calls a remarkable experience. And how do you make it remarkable, right? Because that's, And so and I don't know if you guys can think of anything off the top of your head of a remarkable experience where a brand just goes where you're like, oh, this is fantastic. Because it's like the recipes, a lot of times when I'm talking about digital strategy with my students is really, like what's the secret sauce? Like, how do you, if you just do this A, B, C, D, you're going to get, and it's not, it's so nuanced, and there's just so many different variables that sort of go into play. So anyway, I can't even remember my own question, but I'm sure you'll be able to answer it.
I don't know if it's as formulaic as that, Leslie. Like, I don't know if it's an A to B to C
I don't think
formula.
It can be.
Yeah, I do think, and Danielle and I maybe this is our personal bias, but I think what we see from winning brands are those who are highly personable, extremely human, and they're not hiding behind, let's call it the sort of PR canned responses. It feels like we're having a conversation like we are today. When a problem is brought to their attention, they're acknowledging it, they're addressing it, they're resolving it in a very friendly, open, human way. Like, I think that's sort of what we've been seeing a lot more of lately. And this, let's call it this trend of customers really wanting that empathetic, compassionate conversation when they do reach out for any kind of support. Like, I think that's also part of it.
What a remarkable experience that is when you actually treat people like human beings as opposed to just treating them.
Yeah.
And it is tough because, I think it is tougher for businesses because they do have to, and I know the word is sort of overused in the past few years, but they do have to pivot to realizing that they're dealing human to human and not just, and that's the frustration I have with people.
Yeah, like, do you want to be seen as an interaction or do you want to be seen as a customer?
Right. Yeah. And the bots, I guess, have a place too, because when those bots sort of came about, I was like, oh, this is creepy. Yet I'm the same person who, let's say I'm going to go and order takeout food from like, let's just say Swiss Chalet, because we're Canadian, so we know that brand. So I would rather do the online experience than to pick up the phone and then call someone and do all. So it may take me longer, which sounds really like, my mother's like, you're an idiot. Like, why would you go and take this longer process online when you can just pick up the phone? I'm like, I don't want to talk on the phone to anybody. Like, it's so weird. There's some things that we want to digitize. We don't want to talk to humans, and in other ways we do. So, yeah.
I feel like you were both reading telepathically what Angelo had wrote. So I just want to take a minute just to pick up, Margaret, on what you were talking about. So Angelo is just highlighting the more and more we digitize the customer experience, how do we make sure that we don't lose track of that human warmth and authenticity? And so I think you definitely talked a lot about that as well. It's about how you can equip your frontline team so that they can be themselves, that they can inject personality into their conversations so that they're not scripted. Yes, there are, there's the ability to use canned responses sometimes in certain ways to help make the experience more efficient, but it's about using it at the right time and ensuring that the conversation feels just like that, a conversation. I feel now with the pandemic, more than ever, it's so important in any customer experience, whether it's phone, online. Customers really need to feel heard. We need to show compassion. We need to be sensitive. People have lost their jobs. People have been isolated. Like, as human beings, like, never have we ever been challenged. And so I think from a customer service perspective, we absolutely need to lead with empathy and compassion, regardless of the channel the customer reaches out to for support, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. With authenticity, absolutely. This is a question, it's coming out of left field because you guys aren't prepared for this question either, but I do teach a lot of people from different cultures. So one of the roles that I have in teaching digital strategy is people from, let's say, either China and or from India that say, oh my gosh, you Canadians are so, and like just North Americans and even the States is a little bit further ahead than we are as Canadians, but how backwards we are with technology, that we're so far behind everyone. So have you guys been sort of looking at customer service from other countries to see how they're sort of having this it's an easier omni-channel approach, I suppose, in China, where their tools it's easier for the customer to get that experience. Can you speak about that a little bit at all?
I mean, I think the sort of international trends that we've been seeing is that there's certainly, when it comes to China, India, parts of Europe, Africa, a lot more messaging when it comes to customer service, customer conversations. WeChat, WhatsApp, a lot of the messaging platforms being the predominant channel, versus in Canada, we may see, if you're even in social, it's maybe Facebook, more so live chat. I don't know, though, that, Leslie, when it comes to saying, you know, we're so behind, I think technology is the tool, the platform, but it doesn't have to be the way you deliver. It doesn't have to be, technology doesn't dictate that feeling, that connection that you have with the customer. It's an enabler for sure, but that doesn't, you know, sort of to Angela's point, like digital isn't the way of being. It's an enabler, and it shouldn't be a barrier.
That's so great. That's pretty profound. Yeah, because it's again, how do we, it's not about the technology, it's about the user behavior. It's how do we create those relationships? So you sort of see that's like, as we sort of, and this is sort of a different customer experience is, let's say and you guys really talk really more about, like, are you talking really more about online stuff? Because I'm just even thinking, and my brain is just sort of going to this digital first experience, even when you're shopping now. Let's say you go to a kiosk, or like you go to Home Depot, and they've done away with, you know, we're having to do self-scanning checkouts. Do you guys ever work with brands like that, or is it really more just the online experience that you guys are working with?
Yeah, our focus is definitely to date has been working with brands specifically on their digital customer service experience, online support, whether it's live chat, social media, text messaging, so email, those types of support. But digital, when you think about it, is much more than that. There's video support. There's self-serve shows up in many different ways. You called it one, which is the self-serve kiosk, which I do often do myself when I go to Shoppers Drug Mart, as an example. So to date, though, I would say the companies that we're working with, they've been more focused on the experiences for their customers from an online perspective.
Yeah, I've even seen, I was at Sobeys over right before the holidays, and I noticed they even have digital carts, which I thought was like, I was like, whoa, this is kind of wild that you're getting now grocery carts where you can scan in, I guess, as you're putting it into the cart now. I was like, we are going into the future, ladies. Like, we are, it's like, this is old, right?
But that transformation shows up in many different ways. You know, you're also teaching as well. So even tools that colleges and universities now are deploying, you know, information boards that are interactive that you can use. So depending on if you're on site or off site, it's really quite interesting to see what the investments are in automating the experience and making the experience so that it can be self-serve driven, not requiring support of somebody to be there with you. So it's quite amazing to see how things have really quite accelerated. And again, the pandemic has been a large part of that shift that we've seen.
Right, and having to ramp up fast as we go into it, as we are in another lockdown again. I was going to anticipate that is this the fifth one someone was saying? Oh my word, like how often we are now really having to, you know, consume information from online. Thank goodness we have these tools to keep our sanity, you know, quote unquote. You know, because if we didn't, you know, can you imagine how isolating it would be even more so if we didn't have these online experiences, particularly during a pandemic? So
absolutely.
Yeah. I can't believe we have gone through the hour, and I have learned so much from you guys already. And there's so many more questions I have for you. So, but if you guys have any sort of last words of a mantra, a belief, a motivational phrase that you think, you know, you either believe in yourself or you think your customers should really be thinking about, do you guys have anything to share from that standpoint?
Okay, well, it's quite funny because there's two mantras that I live by. One, if you ask my children, I say it daily. They now say it as well, which is wake up, kick ass, be kind and repeat. That I just, it's not the one I put on our website, by the way. I thought long and hard about it, but it's definitely something that I think really is important, which is be the best that you can, make a difference when you can, but be kind. I think that's so important. And that really brings back in this compassion, leading with empathy, how important that is. And repeat, consistency is key. So I think that would be one. And then the other one is that great things never came from comfort zones. I am a true believer in what's next. Push the bar, raise the bar, dream big, be aspirational, create your strategy. It's really important not just to keep doing things that you're comfortable with. The best learnings come from change. The best learnings come from doing things differently. And yet you might trip up and you might fail, and that's okay as long as you learn from it and you move forward. So just because you're comfortable, you're going to expecting different results. You know the saying, they're going to be exactly the same. So I think that those are a couple for me. Over to you, Margaret, for any final.
I guess my favorite mantra is all about integrity, and and integrity means doing the right thing even when no one's looking. That's for brands, and that's for human beings too.
I love that one too.
I know. And I think both of them they're so important. And it's oftentimes, I think, when we're so in doing the work that we're doing, we don't necessarily take it from that perspective, because strategy isn't necessarily sexy, right? Strategy isn't necessarily the sexy piece of all of it. It's not the bells and the whistles, but the core of it. And when you come from that place of authenticity, and when you come and you put yourself out there to be vulnerable, to fail, you know, I don't even like the word fail, and most people don't. I like to reframe that into, like, there is no failure, there's only feedback. Because even when you're doing something and it doesn't work, you're learning. And I think you guys have, or not even alluded to it, you've said point blank, even when your customers aren't happy, it's a learning opportunity. So awesome. So how can people reach you? How can people reach you guys to get in touch if they want more information?
Well, LinkedIn would be great. We're always looking to grow our networks. And Leslie, you know, you're like the LinkedIn expert for sure. So I would encourage people, please reach out to us. We would love to grow our network. And also leaptodigital.ca is our website. So absolutely come and check us out and reach out if you have any questions. We love connecting with other people and learning from other people and having conversations like this. So reach out for sure. And Leslie, thank you so much for having us. What a great way for us to start off the new year. And it's so nice to see you. I won't say how long it's been, but you're still looking, she looks fabulous, doesn't she? Like, oh my goodness, just gorgeous. But thank you so much for having us on. This was a great way for us to jumpstart our year for sure.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I love about where we went to high school, Go Lancers, at Agincourt, was just like, we had such a great group of people that we went to school with, and most of them have ended up in very successful roles. And we're just, and that kind of going back to the whole theme about our conversation, a lot of people are authentic. They're good people. I'm really proud of, like, the legacy of our cohort when we went to school together. I love people who come to our school. So, and I think the other thing I wanted to ask you before we sort of sign off is, you don't just work with Canadians too, right? Or like, are you specifically focusing Canadians, or do you focus on American businesses as well?
We'll work with anybody around the world.
I mean, that's amazing, because I mean, I know from your background working at Rogers, that's a big. I mean, Americans, if you don't know what Rogers is, it's like the Verizon, the AT&T, but I mean, publishing. I mean, you name it, Rogers has got a hand in it here in Canada. So your big business experience sort of lends itself from, you know, the scope of having that experience in the big organization all the way through to small, medium-sized businesses as well. So I just want to make sure people know they can come to you with any kind of questions that they have about their own customer service and how to deliver that most effectively. So thank you guys again. I'm so
Thank you so much, Leslie. This was great.
Great.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk really soon. Okay. Bye for now.
Thanks.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.